Connecticut and Massachusetts, Z&M Homes buys houses. Sell your property to the local guys.
Needs repairs, updates, maybe foreclosure or inherited? No problem. We gotcha. Google or add us on Facebook at ZANDMHomes.com.
It's Baxie's musical podcast.
In September of 2021, I interviewed the legendary Joe Keithley of the Canadian hardcore band D.O.A. For well over 40 years, Joey Shithead, as he's more widely known, has served the band as its longest-serving member, run Sudden Death Records, which has released material from bands like The Damned and Sham 69, The Vibrators, and Mojo Nixon, and many, many more, and more recently has been serving his second term as a city councillor in his hometown of Burnaby, British Columbia, a Canadian city of over 250,000 people. Now, as implausible as it might seem that a city that large would elect a man known internationally as Joey Shithead, Joe Keithley is a relentlessly active individual that has spent an entire career focused on public service, kicking ass, and getting stuff done. For fans of D.O.A., most would be aware that Joey holds true to the motto, talk minus action equals zero. It's a concept that he takes to heart with great passion and sincerity. It's the same slogan that has led the band to become one of the most legendary and respected hardcore bands in history, releasing 18 albums, touring relentlessly, and adapting a DIY work ethic that would make most people choke. If James Brown was supposed to be the hardest working man in show business, then Joey Shithead has to at least be in the top 5. And on top of all of that, Sudden Death Records has just released the 40th anniversary reissue of their classic EP, War on 45, which not only includes the original 8 tracks, it also includes 7 bonus tracks, including demos with their original drummer, Chuck Biscuits. Also a 12-page booklet written by Joey himself, and it also comes in limited edition color vinyl, which looks just awesome. And on top of that, Joe has even released his first solo album in 16 years called Stand, which takes a roots-flavored look at some very serious topics as only Joey Shithead can do. He's going to talk about that and a whole lot of other stuff, too, and that's why it's always great to welcome back my guest today, Burnaby City Councilor Joe Keithley from D.O.A. on Baxie's Musical Podcast. How are you?
Not bad. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. You go by Baxie or by Mike?
Either one's fine. Whatever you're comfortable with. Do you go by
Right.
Keithley or Shithead? Which one do you feel better with?
It depends if I'm at City Hall, it's usually Keithley. If I'm with D.O.A., it's usually Shithead, right? My favorite part was, I don't know, for 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we'd be at D.O.A., be like stopping to like, a fast food restaurant on the road. And somebody go, hey, Shithead, should I order for you? And the people behind the counter would look at it, and then I'd turn around and look at them. Hey, that's the nicest thing they call me.
Well, I have to say, for a rock star politician who is practically on time, you would get my vote. If I were living up there, I would have to vote for you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what to congratulate you on first. I don't know whether to congratulate you on the solo album or the 40th anniversary of War on 45, which I have to say I have owned in various forms for a very long time. This has always been like one of my favorites, my favorite hardcore records. I always thought this was kind of underrated in a way, but just the songs were just always so great.
Yeah, I agree. It's overshadowed for us by Hardcore 81, but I thought it was probably the most innovative album that we did, especially at the time, like doing like a reggae song. I mean, not that others weren't. The Clash had done a few, and obviously the Bad Brains were like super great band at that, right? Friends of ours, and we played with them. So I just think, it's a great record. Like it's on a par with, to me, it's on a par with Hardcore 1 and Something Better Change. Those are the 3 best albums. And it's like, I've been trying to write an album that good ever since.
But you've got 17 more albums to go here. By the time you get to Treason, that'll put you at about 110 years old.
We were looking up, so I've done the 18 D.O.A. albums, 3 sort of solo albums. So that's 21. But then I looked up the person with the most albums. There's not the most albums, but Dolly Parton's got 65 albums, right?
Right.
So I'm way behind her. And then we did a calculation about how many songs I'd written. And it turned out it was only about 250. And there was a comedian, Steve, something. He was a talk show host, a comedian, songwriter. But apparently he wrote 7,500 songs.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I told my son that. I says, "Well, Dad, you got a long ways to go. Better get busy."
I did an interview with a guy almost a year and a half ago. This guy, R. Stevie Moore. I don't know if you're aware of the guy, but this is a guy who lives in Tennessee now, and he's recorded over 400 albums, all of them double albums, and it's all home recording. So he basically puts out everything he records, scratches and dents and everything else. But the guy's like this world-class songwriter.
Wow.
His father used to play with Elvis, and just a remarkable, talented guy. But he never stops recording.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, obviously, you're going to get stuff that some stuff better than others, right? That's just the way it is. But if you keep going, you're going to come up with a lot of flaw stuff, and good chance it is good.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one of the things that's interesting about what he does, and it actually kind of applies to what D.O.A. had done for your entire career, is you really both took a do-it-yourself approach to your music.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys were just young guys. There were a number of you, not just in D.O.A., that started their own labels. I mean, there's Sudden Death, there's SST, there's Alternative Tentacles. I mean, you guys did everything from making posters to booking gigs to finding couches to sleep on or providing couches for guys who are coming in and out of places. It's kind of weird how time has kind of brought that back after COVID. There's a lot more people now going back to those principles and releasing and recording music completely on their own and taking full control of what they do.
Yeah, I think you're kind of better off if you're in control. I mean, unless you some sort of real commercial entity that is going to be like sell millions, then but a lot of people, they become big. If somebody, the superstars that sell millions of records or millions of Spotify downloads, then they often start their own label too. It was actually kind of funny because I had Sudden Death going and then it kind of stopped. And I think it was about maybe 20 years ago, I approached Fat Mike about doing some D.O.A. stuff. He went, "You're crazy. You're better off doing your own label." It's like, it turns out he's right. So it worked out well. We put out like maybe close to about 120 different things on Sudden Death, right? And you know what? A whole bunch of them missed the mark and didn't sell.
Yeah.
So I have a garage full of stuff that's stacked up. But it was all good. I put out a lot of records by friends that I thought were talented and needed to get a record out, and put out like a lot of D.O.A. stuff, right? So,
in the case of Warren 45, the reissue of it, what I've seen of it, because I haven't got I've got this one right now, and still loving it. I mean, it looks fantastic. The way the vinyl on it looks is unbelievable. It's just really really beautiful. But they're limited edition colored vinyl.
Yeah, with the red right now. Yeah, we just did 500 of those. And then there's the splatter, which we only did 20 of those. Because what they have to do, there's a pressing plant. Like, fortunately, they're called Clampdown. They're like 10 minutes from my house here in Burnaby, BC. And they do the splatter, but they have to stop the press and drop in these different bits of ink to make these bizarre things. And it takes too much time. So like Billy, my friend who runs the thing, he actually calls those records stupid fancy records, right? Because and they're expensive to make. He says, "I'll only do 20 because it takes too long. We got too many records to run.
Right.
So I'm not waiting around. So if you want them, you pay a premium for them, and so on and so forth, right?" But the Warren 45, I'm really happy with it. We had the bonus tracks because Chuck. Okay, so Dimwit, older brother, the legendary Chuck Biscuits. I both grew up with them in North Burnaby. So he obviously played on the original Warren 45 tracks, right? So to make it interesting for the 40th anniversary, we grabbed 7 that Biscuits, his younger brother, had drummed on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the legend is that, not the legend, but the story is like, because we used to practice in Dimwit's garage when we were teenagers with our horrible teenage rock bands, right? Like, I think Stone Crazy is the name of one band, and we were awful, right? But Chuck used to sit in there like up on the bunk, and he'd drum along on bongos, and that's where he picked up all his rhythm, was watching his brother, right? So I thought it'd be fascinating to get both brothers involved with their takes, and some of the tracks that Chuck played on were the demos for the actual War in 45. But we got in an argument. He got in an argument with the rest of the band and quit,
Yeah.
and then joined Black Flag.
So when that
Not a bad band to quit D.O.A. for. So
no, not bad, but when you replaced them, I mean, you had Wimpy Roy on bass and then Dimwit on drums. It didn't sound like you guys lost a whole hell of a lot. I mean, it just, the band just continued to get as good, if not better, than it was on Hardcore 81.
Yeah, real solid lineup. Those guys are great. Dimwit's fantastic drummer, like as good as his brother. Different style, right? His brother's quicker, and Dimwit's more like the brutalizer, right? So, and you never wanted to run into him in a dark alley, right? You wouldn't walk out type thing. And Wimpy was a fantastic bass player, although he was better known for singing the Subhumans at the time. But when that was our teenage rock band, was Dimwit, Wimpy, and I, and also Jerry Useless, who turned out to be the bass player for the Subhumans from Canada, right? So we all grew up like 2 blocks from each other in like a small town.
By the time, so we're talking, 1981, 82, you guys were established by that point and doing a relentless amount of gigs. I mean, you guys were playing all over the place. And correct me if I'm wrong, at least the first Canadian band that was touring nationwide here in the States, playing everywhere. And the reputation of D.O.A. as a live band is absolutely legendary. I think the only other band that people say may have even been a little bit better would have been Bad Brains. But I mean, for the most part, everyone says D.O.A. was unbelievable.
Yeah, we had a lot of practice, and people do say that, and that's I'm really appreciative of people reference us like that. Boy, that was easy to say for other people, not for me. We played so many shows. By the time, it's kind of like, that's why usually bands' first album or two are usually some of the best they ever do, because they played those songs like a couple hundred times. Okay, we got 20 songs. What are we gonna do? Well, same thing we've been doing for the last 100 shows, right? So they're honed to fine detail, and I think that really helps. So, I mean, by that point, by the time we got Something Better Change out, our first tour was in '79. I booked it. I had no idea what I was doing. We started in LA. We didn't have any money. There was a record company that ordered us like $60, so we needed it for gas. We went into the president's office and sat on his desk until he forked over the $60, and that gave us, gas was cheap in those days, so that helped us get to Texas, right? And we played there. And we had 3 shows in Texas, but I forgot to reconfirm 2 of them, so it turned out we only had 1 show in Texas. I wasn't much of a booking guy. It took some learning, right? So, and we kind of set the template. People give us credit for setting up that path and stuff like that, like of the first places people could play. And then I started trading information with my friend Chuck Duskowski, bassist for Black Flag, and we would go like, don't go to Can't Tell Productions in Sacramento, because you never can tell we get paid from that ripoff, right? Or here's a good spot. This guy, guy give you $100 and you can crash in his basement type thing. Was it that kind of information? Like, so me and him trade that back and forth, because they were doing a lot of touring at that time as well, obviously, with their different 4 different singers that they ended up with.
Right.
Later on, finally ended up with Henry, obviously, right? And all 4 singers were great. We played with all the different lineups of Black Flag. Anyways, but that that sort of set up the template, right? I mean, obviously you have bands like Dead Kennedys were going out playing shows. They were huge at the time, right? But they would like fly in and do a big show in New York or do a big one in Chicago, and nothing wrong with that. But like, we were like in a van, and we had this crap van that Randy Rampage, rest his soul, bought. And it was so bad, we were in a snowstorm one time that Randy's driving, and the wipers would only go towards the driver's side. So I had the window open, I had a string on. I had to pull the wipers back and the door, so we could see, and I had got my head out the window. Now, a little to the left, there's a snowdrift here, Randy.
That's when do-it-yourself becomes a pain in the nuts.
Yeah, it was true strength.
I remember the early 80s, and I remember I remember watching, Jello Biafra on the Phil Donahue show, and there was a
Right, right.
and there was so much resistance to not just the Dead Kennedys, but really all those hardcore bands,
Yeah.
back then. And I remember friends of mine whose parents were just out of their minds that their kids had become punks, and it was just so much resistance. And I always thought it was interesting because I have all the Dead Kennedy records too, and it's like, to me, I understand that what they were doing, was satirical rather than literal. I mean, no one was actually going to go out and kill the poor or lynch the landlord, but
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was so much resistance to that whole genre of music. You must have felt that, as well, going from town to town and having places with torches and pitchforks trying to push you out of the way.
Yeah, I think you had like a ton of resistance, right? I remember, like, oh God, the guy tried to. I think it was in Tallahassee the first time I went down to Florida, and it was the gig was clearly illegal. It was in some burned out building. The guy had thrown a PA in there, right? And we got played about 2 songs. All of a sudden, these cops came in, and the head cop, he looked like Kenny Rogers with the full-on gray hair and a beard, and I expect him to burst into the gambler like, "Oh, I think I can figure it out. We'll play it with you, right? I'm a fan." And he just threatened us like, you guys play one more note, I got a place for you. And, it's not very comfortable. I went, okay, we're done here, right? But people were like pretty rough. Yeah, like you said, say the stuff like "Let's Lynch the Landlord" and all different lyrics like that. People were coming up with like these really bold statements. But the one that really got me that started all this that everybody knows was like listening to the Ramones first record, and
Yeah.
they're like "Beat on the Brat." And the first time we listened to that, we're like, "Beat on the Brat with a baseball bat." Wow. And the Ramones got ridiculed for having these like outrageous lyrics, but it actually like broke this ground that, what? This is actually fun and satirical. That I don't want to go down the basement, "Hey Daddy O," that kind of thing. They were like, crazy stuff, right? And people took inspiration from those early bands, and obviously the Ramones being like, to me the ultimate like in punk rock. So you came up with it. Everybody tried to be more outrageous than the Lost Guy, so we spared no effort trying to be funny and like say taking the name Shithead, right? So that it worked really well in the newspapers here in Vancouver. People go like, "Oh, it's this new band, and the singer's name is Shithead." So I'd be over visit my mom and dad, and they were older, and they'd get the local paper, and my mom would read, "Oh, there's an article about D.O.A. here, Joe." She'd read it to me, and when it got to "and led by lead singer," and she'd fold down the newspaper, look at me very seriously. "I think you should use your real name," and like start away. But Mom, it's working.
But you're absolutely right. One of the things that I think for many of us who really enjoyed that music is some of the lyrics were hilarious. Some of them were poignant. Some of them were downright filthy. And maybe the shock value is kind of what a lot of us really kind of wanted to hear at the time. Yeah. I don't think you could get away with that today with the political correctness and the climate in the same way. I just think it'd be received even worse today than it was back in 1981.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people would just like they would not get it, right? But that's the thing about like punk rock. Why it was attracted people for a couple of reasons. One, that it kind of just broke this like barrier. You got to think about rock and roll at the time, like disco was big. All the radical rock bands were gone or retired or they sold out. And so then when I heard about punk rock, it kind of reminded me of like early rock. Like, when the guys were like, before they got all tamed and became corporatized, right? They promoted Elvis Presley. Hey, I'm a big fan of Elvis, right? But you know what? It was corporate, especially when we started getting the movies, right? So, and like the rock bands that, when I was in high school, I was listening to Jimi Hendrix and Country Joe McDonald, right. And they were like protesting the Vietnam War and causing trouble and speaking up for people, right? And, but by the time 77, 78 came along, that was out the window. It was all like, kind of corporate rock, right? Yeah. If you ask me.
But for a period between like 1973 to 75, you had a lot of this corporatized rock coming out. And I think when I was in high school, and I graduated like in 84, in a town in Massachusetts where people thought the Cars were a punk band. I mean, it was
right.
I knew one kid that had a Ramones record, and he only had one, and everybody else completely rejected the entire thing. But when I went away to college, and all of a sudden I started to get exposed to this stuff, a
Yeah.
lot of the things that you guys and the Dead Kennedys were singing about was stuff that really kind of started to open my mind to, my own opinions, my own political beliefs. It's like all of a sudden it just kind of, jarred something loose where I started to think about things in a much broader way. For me, it was really, really healthy to discover that stuff. And you're right. I mean, it's a decade of disco and worse.
Keep going.
Sure.
Sorry, buzzer for the laundry.
Well, what are you doing? You doing whites, towels? What are you doing?
Rags, yeah, cleaning rags.
Oh,
right?
there you go. There you go. But no, but it was a weird decade because things had changed so much in music, and it really just became staid and boring. So I think
Yeah.
that's hardcore was like and punk. The early stuff was like a lightning bolt that I think a lot of people just needed to be a part of.
Yeah, and it took a long time before the record industry figured out how to really sell it. So that's why, like, you got the early bands didn't really sell like a whole ton of records, but like in the '90s, they were like, "Oh, these Nirvana guys, they're kind of like punks, aren't they?" And then you had a few others came along the way, and then it got much better in the 2000s with like stuff like Blink 182 or whatever, like more pop punk type thing. But in the early days, the record industry hated this stuff, right? And they were just like, this is like a threat to society type thing. That's what we're viewed as. That was a threat, and I kind of enjoyed that, right? If you ask me, right? So, and you had to watch it depending on where you were. If you were by yourself, right? I know a bunch of people that got beat up because they thought like, guy's got green hair. Oh, he must be a fag. That kind of bullshit, right?
Right.
So so it really made you stand up, but it was adventurous, and it was no holds barred, and that's what I was trying to say a couple minutes ago. That is what drew people in, and then it was the early punk rock shows. I remember we did around Vancouver. We'd have like us, the punk band. We'd have an experimental band. We'd have a reggae band. We'd have like a new wave kind of band, right? And people, it was because there wasn't many punks, so just sort of thrill seekers and bon vivants, as you might say, came to see the show. Oh, what is this new stuff, right? And we're just like, and it drew in like a real artistic crowd because it was challenging and adventurous.
One of the things that D.O.A. had always been known for, and I think it's the more I think about it over the years, I think it's a really great message, and it's the whole talk minus action equals zero idea. And I think it's actually a tremendously important and timeless concept because it's just so simple. But there's so many damn people who go out of their way to get in the way or to not do anything
Right.
at all. Where did that idea come from? What was the germination of that?
Yeah, there's like an anarchist magazine here in Vancouver called Open Road, and our manager was an anarchist. Subhumans manager were anarchists. They were anarchist friends, and they both managed punk rock bands, right? So we saw this on the front of the magazine. Open Road said "talk minus action equals zero." So we asked them, "Hey, can we use that? That's really great. That's kind of says what we are." And they said, true to anarchist philosophy, the world belongs to everybody, so use it. So we took it and put it on records and told people that, and then put it on like stuff to be cool on the dance floor, don't smash people. We hand up these little pamphlets, right? Get fair and kind to people, and we put talk minus action equals zero, because it's really easy to talk but actually do nothing. And that's what that's what most politicians' job is. They talk about something and they actually achieve nothing. But I figured for like a bunch of punks to take that slogan, it was just, the time was right. And we just lived by that.
And a lot of punks did adopt that. I mean, you think of like Ian MacKaye, Minor Threat and Discord. I mean, there's a guy, if there was ever a guy who kind of lived that expression, there's a guy who most certainly did. And has done very well with it as a result of taking that philosophy and never letting go of it. Because that's the other thing. It's one thing to take that. It's another thing to do it all the time, and that's really hard for some people.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think that it's easy to fall back into not doing much, right, and just going along. I mean, it's really easy to be a sheep. And it's hard to take charge of your life, but I always feel that people should take charge of their life and try and do something better for the world, for their neighbors, for themselves, for
Yeah.
their family, right? And I'm not talking like money. I'm talking about like, let's get something done that's positive that helps people.
You touched on it, real briefly. That sort of thing. It must be a weird thing for other politicians to hear. You talk minus action equals zero, because it's the kind of thing that really does apply to public service
Yeah.
and to elected life. Tell me about, in what ways did you try to adapt that to, serving your constituents?
Yeah. So I'm in my second term now. I got reelected, so I must be doing something right. So I've been elected for almost 5 years now. I think you just have idea. I've always been an idealist, right? So, but when you get into politics, you have to have a practical side too. So you got to find a way to convince people, like your fellow colleagues in council, that this might be a better way to do this than what we've been doing for years, right? And then, and fortunately, in my position, our current mayor, Mike Hurley, him and I got elected at the same time too, and we got rid of this dreadful mayor that had been around for about 30 years. And so it's like it was Mike and I that unseated him, because it was a one-party monopoly for like 20 years with the mayor and his cronies. And so that sort of set up, okay, now it's time for change in Burnaby. So we made like a really big change with working on and have provided a bunch of affordable rentals and more housing and care for the homeless and, different stuff that I thought was important when I was running for office. So, but I mean, you gotta, like when you talk to your colleagues, they may be impressed at the fact I'm in music, but doesn't mean they like my politics.
Right.
So, I got to come up with something that I convinced them, or a couple of times it's happened where they wanted to buck against it, because I'm running against the majority. There's like 5 people. There's 9 of us all together, including the mayor. And there's a majority of 5 from one party. So they can pretty well block anything they want. But you know what? A couple of times, I got public opinion on my side first, and they just sort of looked around at the PAC meeting, went like, "Oh, I guess Joe's right. Sure, yeah, I'll vote for that." That's the way you got to do it. If you can't convince them, you get the public pissed off and go like, "Okay, no, we want to change this. We want to do something different."
Just so that it's clear here, the area that you are representing, you're talking about like a city of nearly a quarter of a million people. It's a pretty large area.
Yeah, we're the third biggest. That doesn't sound like much in American terms, much bigger country, but we're the third biggest city in British Columbia, and we're right next door to Vancouver, which is the biggest city, and not far from Surrey, which is the second biggest. Anyways, and I think it's really funny because we have conventions where all the local politicians meet. And whenever I get there, they go, "How's things in Burnaby?" Is the first question. I go, "That's going great." And the next question is, "Are you on tour?" They all want to know about the music. Oh yeah. And then the word got out that not the word got out. There's no secret. Then these different charities and different cultural organizations started going like, the mayor Mike Hurley. He came over here from Ireland, Northern Ireland, as a musician. Right. Yeah, that's how he got his work permit to come into the country. So me and him, we do shows together where we play for good causes and raise money, and we just do like covers and stuff like that. We don't do a bunch of radical D.O.A. shows, but it's worked out really well, right? Because music is the communicator. No matter how much hatred and horrible things have happened in the world, the one thing everybody loves is music. And it's like the universal language that you can't deny. You may not like all types of music that you hear, or there's plenty I can't stand. But it does speak to people around the world, and it's like you're talking about like D.O.A. playing a lot of shows. That I'll give you the tally. Like we played over 4,500 shows in 50 different countries on 5 different continents.
Wow.
Right, so it's a lot, right?
That's an awful lot.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I obviously, being in the States, I don't know exactly everything that I probably should about Canadian politics, but I know here in the States we are so divided politically, to the point where you're either right or wrong, and there really is no middle ground. There's no way to build consensus anymore, to the point where like actual political discussions are almost impossible to manage. And we seem to have lost the ability to be objective and to accept the fact that other people may have different points of view that are just as valid as our own. Do you feel that in Canada? Has that been part of that landscape, or is that different?
It's we're getting a little bit more like the USA, our politics. Not quite to that extreme. It bothers me that the Americans are divided like that. Like, I played so many shows down there. I probably spent 6, 7 years of my life in the United States, being on tour, and got hundreds of friends down there. So it's disturbing to see this division, and because you gotta like when you get elected. That's one thing I always said here. Like, you know what? When I got elected, I'm here to help all the people, not just the people that voted for me. And if all your representatives, whether like local level, senior governments, etc., took that attitude, then they, rather than just serving that one narrow constituency that got them in there or donated the most money or whatever, right? It looked like, no, I got to help those people that didn't vote for me too. You know what? If you did that, probably those people that didn't vote for you go like, no, I never voted for this party before, but that person, that man or woman, did us a solid and didn't care that we didn't vote for him, and got a new sewer system in here, or got the water cleaned up, or whatever it's what the issue is, right? So I don't know how to fix that division. We don't have that as much in Canada. We're heading for an election soon. We have a Conservative Party that's not as right. It's fairly right wing, but not as right wing maybe as some factions of the Republicans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have the sort of governing party that wins almost all the time, called the Liberal Party. And then we have a left-wing party called the New Democrats and the Green Party. Oh, and there's a fifth one called the Bloc Québécois, who only run candidates in Quebec. And then, their issue is Quebec independence, right? So one of their issues.
And they've been pretty successful with that over the years.
They tried a few times, came pretty close in 1990. Like, I think it was 50.1% to 49.9.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. So we could have been two different countries, which would be a mistake, because I say our strength that you got to respect the French language. Just like now people are discovering you got to respect the First Nations languages and First Nations people who have been pretty horribly mistreated throughout our history here, as it has been throughout the entire Western Hemisphere since Europeans arrived. But I think one of the things that keeps Canada like a really great country, not a perfect country, is that we still have a fair bit of stability. And I think that's important in politics, that, and that's the interesting thing about our local level. I say there's 8 councillors, including me, and 1 mayor. So there's 9 of us. So we don't get up in grandstand, stand up and yell and point at the other guy, because these are people we've got to deal with for the next 4 years, right? It's not like 100 of them over here and 200 of us over here type thing, all yelling and trying to make a point on TV, right? So stability is an important part of everything in life.
So how, amongst all of that, do you have time to put together a solo record?
Yeah, right. That's, I don't know. Here it is. I'll get to show the viewer here, right? Joe's stand, and that's a famous bridge, Second Narrows Bridge, Ironworkers Bridge, that collapsed in 1958 through a windstorm. And Stompin' Tom Connors wrote a song about it, and I covered it. And my dad was working on that bridge, but he wasn't on that ship. And 60 guys died, steelworkers.
Oh, wow.
When like a big wind knocked it had it half up and it went into the harbor, right?
Wow.
But they came back and rebuilt it, and people still drive over it, right? So, you know what? I like writing songs. I wanted to, with the solo album, it's called Stam. I wanted to do something that was like different with my buddy Sean, who was producer, engineer. We said, let's take the Rick Rubin approach with Johnny Cash, where he just like Rick Rubin got, okay, play me all the songs and we'll pick out the best 12, right? Make an album. It turned out Johnny Cash, of course, made like, I think 4 albums with Rick Rubin that were all pretty fantastic.
Really
right?
good, yeah.
And revitalized the great Johnny Cash's career. One of my heroes, right? And so we just said, we recorded about 30 songs, and then we put 12 of them into shape and took our time. It got a little bit delayed because of COVID. So we actually started a few years ago on this. So we had time to think about, because you couldn't go touring, right? For a long time.
I listened to the record, and it's funny that you bring up Johnny Cash, because it's a real rootsy feel to the entire record, and it's really cool. I mean, like, I think it's the best version of Folsom Prison Blues since maybe the original.
Well, thank you. I thought it was pretty sharp.
But the one song that really leaps out, and it's the first single, is Fentanyl Blues. forget the fact that it's a really great song, but lyrically it's a really important thing. You're kind of addressing a real horrible scourge that's obliterated lives and families, certainly here in the States. And I got to believe it's certainly worked its way up into Canada.
Yeah, it's a big, very horrible thing. It's that like we've had in BC, we're losing more lives than they are part of Canada. I mean, and it's like I don't know why totally, but like port cities are always the worst cities for like drugs, right?
Yeah.
San Francisco, Vancouver, New York, right? Like that, it's the conduit, right, where it comes in from, right? So, yeah, we've lost tons of lives, and I think the thing is that I wanted to point out to people by writing that song is that probably around here the majority of people that have died from fentanyl is not people that are living on the street. It's like people that you might be your coworkers or your friends or your brother or your cousin or something like that, right? That you think, oh yeah, there's a regular looking person goes to work, makes mortgage payments or whatever, pays his rent, and that person could be dead, right? It's like it's so, and I mean, obviously the drug companies involved behind this didn't care at all. So I mean, this is why they're getting sued by senior levels of government, and justly so.
It is kind of like a self-created problem that they put together and people had to deal with, because I mean, between the strength of opioids and the way people got hooked up on them, and now fentanyl it's just it's just amazing to me that I know for us around here, we're seeing drug busts all the time. Even though they're seizing stuff, you're not solving the issue. You're just someone else is going to get it.
Yeah, and I think that it's the same thing. Like Richard Nixon started. It was the war on drugs, and he got like an addled Elvis Presley to be his commissioner, which is like to me one of the most bizarre photos, the two of them together, right? It just didn't make any sense. I mean, I guess Nixon thought it was a good publicity thing, right? Master politician that he was, master untrustable politician. I should add to that too, right? But I think the thing is, like, it's kind of like you got to treat the drug problem as a medical problem, and not a criminal problem. Because putting people in jail doesn't clean people up, right? You got to take I don't know, 5 or 10 step approach, like where you get people off the street, you try and help them clean up, you try and get them back out working, get back into the workforce. I mean, a lot of times when people take drugs is because they've had some sort of trauma in their life, right?
Yeah.
Mental, from their family, from people they met, whatever, right? It's like this is like an escape, is what it is. Yeah, it's pretty sad.
That's why I think the song provides a good message, and like I said, it is a great song, and a good choice for the first single on the record. I mean, I realize we're talking about a situation that's a little bit bigger than a solo record, but nevertheless, I think you addressed it really well in that song.
Yeah, thank you.
The record does come. I thought this was really cool. We talked about the limited edition colored vinyl. It's Coke bottle colored vinyl, which I think just looks so freaking cool. I love that.
Yeah, I really and people, like, we've done like the Warren 45 we did with Cherry Red, right, as well. And it's just interesting. And then some people like purposely and I totally agree with them too, in a way that they just want the black vinyl, because like, no, the vinyl should be black, and that's the way it's always been, always will be. But if you get, it doesn't cost that much more. So like if you get the colored vinyl, I think it's just like kind of a fun thing to bring out, and then people go like, whoa, okay, that's cool, right? So like I love it myself, right? So,
well, there's some to me, it's what's really neat about it is, and a lot of people are doing that with re-releases or any album there is colored vinyl, and there's something kind of magical about it when you see it for the very first time. You pull it out of the sleeve, and all of a sudden it's not what you expect. I mean, most people expect, the black vinyl, but this one's orange, or this one's, sky blue, or whatever it may be. And I just think that's a really cool way of doing it. Looks great.
Yeah, it looks great. And people over the last number of years, I don't know, 10 years or whatever, when the vinyls become much more popular again, right, that realize that this is the best way of listening to music that we've found.
Yeah.
Hey, it's better than Spotify. It's better than any download. It's better than CD. My other old favorite is cassettes. but it's hard to find a cassette player that works anymore, right? I've still got hundreds of cassettes that when cassettes went out of style, I kept them because they said they're still in vogue with me, right?
Are they even still usable? Those things tend to fall apart after a while.
Yeah, well, I kind of learned how to repair them and stuff like that and tape them together. And, so the old D.O.A. van, their famous van was called the Reed Fleming after the comic book garbage collector guy. Like a bit of an underground thing. You have to look up Reed Fleming. That we had a CD player, but there was also an adapter you could stick in the CD player that you could run a cassette off of, right? And I just thought, and when that van died, I was just, okay, this is really sad. This is the end of an era, right? That old van had all the memories that we had for like 20 years driving around that, and always up on the dash. Right as soon as you got in, I always kept the Bible there. And I'm not religious, but I knew if a policeman came in and saw the Bible and like, oh yeah, these guys are okay, right? These guys are not as bad as they look, even though they got weird T-shirts and weird haircuts. Right?
That probably saved you from getting arrested.
Oh, and we got busted. Our van was broken down. It was in Idaho. It was starting to tour. And of course, it broke down the first day before we even got to one show. And we're outside a convenience store trying to find a mechanic, and hours went by. And finally, these 5-6 cops came and like, okay, what the hell you guys doing here? And here you're trying to rob the convenience store. I said, sir, the van's broken down. It's not much of a getaway vehicle, right? He went, oh, yeah. And then we had this garbage can, it had a giant picture of Elvis on it. And you could tell one guy he had sideburns, one of the cops. And he was looking at it and our drummer very wisely went like, oh, yeah. Yeah, we love Elvis. You know what? Every time we throw something in there, he goes, thank you very much. And that broke the ice with the cops, right? And they let us go.
D.O.A. is still a thing. In fact, you're heading to Germany a couple weeks. Tell me about that.
Yeah, no, the tour's been canceled because I'm stuck here waiting for hernia surgery.
Oh, geez.
So we canceled hernia. Yeah, I 2 weeks I get it, right? So it was supposed to be 2 months ago, but somebody broke into the surgery clinic looking for drugs and triggered the smoke alarm, and the sprinklers went off and destroyed the clinic. So my surgery got put back. So we canceled 17 shows in Europe, and we had a bunch of the Maritimes out, like Nova Scotia way, stuff like that. But we're back starting in September.
Good.
And I and our booking guys are scouring and looking for like the best fit. And so we'll be touring again. And one thing we do have going on next year will be interesting. There's a documentary, Scott Crawford, who made Salad Days about the DC scene, speaking about Ian MacKay and stuff. He did that. He also directed the film about the Cream magazine, Lester Bangs. It's called Boy Howdy. Yeah, so Scott did that. And then Paul Rackman, he's the director. And then Paul Rackman, who did American Hardcore, he's the producer. And the doc's called Something Better Change. And it's kind of about half about D.O.A. and about half my morphing into politics. So we should have that out at film festivals next year. So then the band will, where it's playing, the band will show up and play too, right? Wow. So that'll be exciting. And we should have a new studio all out by then too. I'm working on through my forced sidelining because the hernia surgery. I've been working furiously on songs. Right?
Yeah. Well, with carrying all that stuff, no wonder you got a hernia. That's a lot of weight to carry, Joe.
Yeah. Well, when I saw the surgeon about the hernia, I said, "What should I do?" He says, "Well, you shouldn't sing too hard. You shouldn't lift heavy objects. You shouldn't fly on airplanes, and you shouldn't sit too long in a van." I said, well, those are the four things. That's my very existence, right? Lifting up a 42-pound Marshall head or a cabinet, jumping around stage, I went, thanks a lot. Right?
Well, Joey, it's great to talk to you again. Best of luck with the record stand. It's really awesome. It's great to know that War on 45 is coming back with a reissue. It looks fantastic. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.
And best of luck with your surgery.
Yeah, thank you. Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. Thanks,
okay,
Joe.
Thanks, Mike.
Good to see you. The 40th anniversary reissue of D.O.A.'s War on 45 is out now. You can also pick up Joey's latest solo album, Stand, both available from Sudden Death Records. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like it, rate it, share it, Tell all your friends about it. You can follow the show on all the social medias and reach me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think. Thanks again to Z&M Home Buyers for their support, and thank you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.